When I was a couple weeks short of my 70th birthday, I started thinking about my mother's mother, who lived to be 100, and her mother, who lived to be 102, and my father, who lived to be 90, longer than anyone we had ever heard of in his family. I began to think that maybe our generation could be the first to routinely live to be 100. When I talked about this at family dinner one night, my granddaughter, who was 5, said,
"What are you going to do for the next 30 years, Grandpa?"
Hello, I'm Dr. Janet Price.
And I'm Gregg Kaloustian. And we are Oldish. And this is our podcast, Oldish.
If you're oldish or know someone who is, please join us every week for conversations amongst ourselves
And our special guests
about what it means to be oldish in the 21st century.
If you ever wonder whether you're getting old, you're oldish. What are you going to do for the next 30 minutes? Hi, I'm Gregg, and I'm oldish.
And I'm Janet, and I'm oldish. Welcome to another episode of Oldish, Conversations of Aging in the 21st Century. Tonight, we have the pleasure of talking with Pickleball Nomad, Gregg, about his latest adventure. I'm looking forward to hearing all about it, Gregg. So why don't you take it away? Like, where did you go? What was it like? Take us with you.
I was on the road for almost a month. I traveled in my my van that I fixed up as a van life kind of a van, has a bed and a refrigerator and water and place to cook and so on and so forth. I was on the road from October 28th until 2 days before Thanksgiving when I came home. I went from my home in Maine all the way out to California to spend some time with my daughter and her family in Southern California. And then I turned around and came back. I took a more northerly route on the way back than I had planned. My original plan when I started thinking about this back in the spring was that I might spend 6 weeks to 2 months on the road and visit a lot of national parks and, check out all the sites and so on. But I ended up bookending it a little bit for family reasons, including getting back for Thanksgiving. When I planned it, I forgot about Thanksgiving. So I came racing back for Thanksgiving just south of the storms in Buffalo. So I didn't get to see 6 feet of snow. I got to see no snow, but a lot of cold. So I started off, I played pickleball where I usually do in Brunswick, Maine, on my way south. And I ended up playing 12 different times in 11 different places on the road,
Wow.
Including that first night. We met in Massachusetts, where we met Erin McHugh, who was doing a book signing and an introduction for her book, Pickleball is Life, that came out the 1st of November. We did a podcast episode talking with her. If you haven't heard it, you should check it out. After we left the book signing that night, I drove over to another town in Massachusetts where the apps that I use that I talked about in the episode on a Down East Swing, I use these 3 apps all the time. The Apple Maps app. There's an app called iOverlander, which is a mapified view of places where you can camp, including free places. So I set the filter for free places. And another one called Places to Play, which is sponsored by the USA Pickleball Association, which is a map with icons on it for indoor and outdoor play. And you can click on those and they'll give you details about, is it a tennis club? Is it a rec center? Is it a outdoor courts? And when they play, many of the pieces of information are out of date, but also many of them are maintained by someone who puts their phone number in there, whether it's the rec center director, or in many cases, as I found, it's the local USA Pickleball Association ambassador for the area. So as I went along, I would contact some of the ambassadors. I would call and find out who was playing. So I have couple of stories about that. So anyway, on the first night, I parked the van and I slept in the parking lot next to the pickleball courts in Sharon, Massachusetts. It was one of my first experiences of sleeping in a public place because I overlander said it was okay. And I was a little bit anxious about it. But I had learned that places that don't want you to park there overnight always have signs that say don't park here. And I walked all around the parking lot, and there were a couple other cars in it. It was a very large parking lot. There were a couple other cars in it, but no signs like that. So I figured, man, what the heck? If somebody comes along and says you can't stay here, then I had a plan B, which was a rest area about 10 miles away. So I had a plan B, but I spent the night quite comfortably in the van in the parking lot next to the pickleball courts, which was kind of fun. I woke up in the morning and made my coffee on my propane stove, and there was a porta potty there, which came in handy, and it was nice. And I heard some cars coming and going in the night, but when I got up, there were no other cars in the parking lot, so I presume that nobody stayed there. But there were no knocks on the window. This van lifers talk about the dreaded knock on the window. I woke up in the morning and I got myself ready to play, and you and Aaron and a friend of yours showed up to play, and we played. I think we played for about an hour, the four of us. It was pretty windy. It was a little chilly, but I think we had a very good time playing. It was a lot of fun. It was the first time we had actually met Erin in person, and she is in fact a lot of fun. And then after your friend left, we stuck around and played. The local folks had open play that morning, and we stuck around and played with them for a while. So that was pretty good. And then you and I had some lunch, and I hit the road. So the adventure started off on a very high note. It was great, seeing you. That was the first time. We've known each other for years, and we've both been playing pickleball for years, but it was the first time we'd ever played pickleball together. So that was a lot of fun.
So a very auspicious start to your journey.
Yeah, very auspicious start. And it continued to get better from there. The apps told me that halfway on the trip I stayed with friends and family. In addition to sleeping in the van, I also visited friends and family. And my first friend that I was going to stop and visit lives outside Chicago. And so I took the apps and I figured out how far away that was. And I couldn't do that in one day. So I picked a spot on the map app that looked like it was about halfway to Chicago from where we were. And then I got out the iOverlander app to look for places to sleep. And then I took out the places to play app, and I found that in Canandaigua, New York, there's open play in these great brand new pickleball courts at the top of the Finger Lakes. So I spent the night at a truck stop, got up in the morning and drove through some really wonderful countryside on my way to play this. And I thought about the question that I've had in a lot of my travels, which is, I'll come to a place and I'll look around and I say, why does anybody live here? What's going on here? What's the economic engine that causes people to live here? Or are people stuck here? Or, so what's going on? Why would somebody choose to live here? Driving down the back roads, some county roads in upstate New York, that wasn't even a question. It was obvious. It was just gorgeous there. It was rolling hills and farmland and wineries and grapevines growing, and it was just beautiful. And so I didn't have that question. And I played there. So I played in Massachusetts, and the next morning I played in Canandaigua, and it was open play there. They had, I think, 8 courts. And I just, I reached out to the local ambassador, who said that he wasn't going to be there to play, but there would be people there, such and such, and I should just go play. So I did, which confirmed for me my impression, which has been confirmed over and over again, that pickleball players tend to be the nicest, most welcoming people anywhere. They're just all, oh yeah, come on in and play, and some places.
Did you get many questions about, or did you introduce yourself as Pickleball Nomad and tell people your story, or how did that interweave into your experience?
Oh yeah, it did. Yeah, it did. When we first started talking about Pickleball Nomad back in the day, back all a few months ago, I mentioned that one of my anxieties was approaching a group of strangers, as Gregg, and that I'm resistant to the whole notion, and sometimes I just don't even go out of my house because I don't want to come in contact with strangers. But Pickleball Nomad doesn't have that problem. So I put on my Pickleball Nomad suit, and a friend of mine who's a retired sign painter made me magnetic signs for the side of the van that say Oldish, the podcast, and Pickleball Nomad, and have the web addresses oldish.me and pickleballnomad.me. So they're on the side of my van. So people come up to me, even that first day in Sharon, people came up to me and looked at the van and started asking me questions. So, and also, I don't mind bringing it up. So I say, oh yeah, well, people will always say, what are you doing here? Because obviously I'm a stranger. So what are you doing here? The story that I was traveling across the country as Pickleball Nomad and playing pickleball wherever I could was popular everywhere I went.
I'm imagining it would be, and I was wondering if people noticed your sign on the side of your van. So that's really fun because it's I'm happy to say I've seen it, and it's a really nice sign.
The most interesting one of those was Buzzsprout, the website where our podcast is hosted, has a stats page. And so I check periodically, I check the stats to see how many people have listened to the show. And they give location information for everybody that's downloaded the show. So I have a list of cities and countries where people have downloaded the show. And one day I looked at it, and one of the places where somebody had listened to the show was Albuquerque, New Mexico. But I didn't stop in Albuquerque, New Mexico. I drove through it, and there was a lot of traffic. So I think somebody saw it on the side of the on the side of the van,
awesome.
and listened to the show because of the sign without any contact with me at all. So
That's
one thing
great.
about Canandaigua that I'd mentioned the difficulty with going up to strangers, and some of it's related to people who always ask me how tall I am. So what happened in Canandaigua was
I just want to say that I think it's pronounced Canandaigua.
Oh, okay. Sorry. I forgot you're from
Just wanna
upstate New
say,
York, so you know that.
I'm from New York, yeah.
Yeah. Sorry.
Canandaigua. But go ahead.
Canandaigua. Okay. So what they got that I in there for then? Anyway, I was as when you're playing open play, you approach different groups and you end up, playing with them, and groups form and reform and so on. 3 different groups of people that I played with when I went on to the court to start playing with them. 3 different groups of people asked me how tall I am. This is all in the space of an hour.
Wow.
One of the groups, it turns out, I walked onto the court, introduced myself to my partner and to the people across the way that I was going to play with. And one of the guys across the way yelled out, "How tall are you anyway?" Which is this formulation. I don't know why, but my whole life people say, they don't say, "How tall are you?" They say, "How tall are you anyway?" Now, what anyway is doing in there, I don't know. But anyway, so this guy called across the court and he said, "How tall are you anyway?" And I told him, and he said, "Aha, I won." They had made a bet. These 3 guys had seen me across the courts and had made a bet on how tall I am.
Wow.
I know. So it's like, and I'm not even that tall. I'm quite tall, but I'm not like ridiculously tall, I don't think. Anyway, so it carried on like that.
I just want to say that that might, I know it happens to you all the time, but I was thinking it might be of special significance for people as they're sizing up that they're starting to play. And here's this person on the other side of the court who's quite tall. So they're thinking about, do I get the ball around him? Do I get it over him? Probably not going to get it over him.
Yes. Yeah. The people's game changes. And my entire skill set is the length of my arms. I can just reach shots that other people can't. So I'm not actually very good at pickleball, but I can reach shots that other people can't. So it counts. So So anyway, I played there. That was beautiful, beautiful place. There were, in the background there were mansions, and it's a beautiful little town. Obviously not a poor town, so there was no question at all about why people are living there. So then when I left there, I just booked flat out for Chicago and arrived at Chicago at, I think, 9 or 10 o'clock that night. I spent 2 nights there. And my friend had called a friend of his to arrange for me to play pickleball with him at the rec center the next morning. So actually,
that's really nice.
Yeah, I played 3 days in a row to start the journey.
In 3 different places.
3
3
different
days
places.
in a row in 3 different places. Yep.
Yep. And so, that's the whole picture. That's Pickleball Nomad. Slept in my van twice and played pickleball in 3 different places. And again, the experience of the people that I played with was welcoming and friendly and a lot of laughter. So, that's main reason I do it is welcoming and friendly and a lot of laughter. Life doesn't have that in it as much as it should. And so it certainly does.
Yes.
So then I went from there to visit a friend outside of Minneapolis, St. Paul. And I spent a night there with these friends of mine and got up in the morning, and he and I took off for a one-night camping adventure in a state park in Minnesota that would take me back toward my route. But we stopped off on the way in his town, and we found where the people were playing recreational pickleball. And he had never actually played before. He and I had hit the ball back and forth a few times, and his sister plays, and they'd gone out in the parking lot and hit the ball back and forth a few times, but he never actually played. We only played 1 game because we wanted to get on the road. The people that we ended up playing with were just totally welcoming, and he would apologize for missing shots and so on. And they said, "Hey, we've all been there." So, that's this attitude of compassion that pickleball players have, because, very few people have been playing for a really long time. So there's a pretty good chance that you can remember when you first started playing. So there's a lot of compassion for the people who are just starting out and obviously, don't know what to do, don't know the rules, don't know how to hit the ball, so on and so forth.
Yes.
So then I launched myself from there to a place that I've wanted to go to since the 1970s. And it's in Fairfield, Iowa, which is just happened to be when I mapped this out. I didn't know I was going there, but it just happened to be. I was in a hurry to get to not a hurry, but I wanted to get to California relatively soon, and the map app showed that the closest route went within 50 miles of Fairfield, Iowa. So I had to go there, and the reason for that is that Fairfield, Iowa, is the home of Maharishi International University, which is a university that was founded by Maharishi Mahesh Yogi, who brought transcendental meditation to the West. And as you know, and I think I've mentioned before on the podcast, I've been doing TM for 50 years now. And so I had to go there to look at it as long as I was in the neighborhood. And I reached out to somebody there who was the director of visitor events. And I met him there, and he drove me around the campus and he showed me all of the sites and talked a lot about, what the university meant to the community. It's a town of 10,000 people, and there are about 3,000 people associated with the university or the movement in one way or another. So that's a very high percentage of people. I'm fairly certain that I live in a town of 5,500 people, and I've lived here for about 40 years. I am pretty sure I'm the only one in town who's doing TM. So, to be in a place where that high a percentage, and they've been there since 1971, and the campus is beautiful. And afterwards, I described it to him as an outpost of sanity and hope. And that's kind of the way that it felt.
I was wondering how it felt, if you could feel it.
Oh, I definitely could feel it, and I don't want to get too woo-woo here, but I meditated on campus a couple of different times, and I could feel that the meditation felt different. It just felt quieter. And in fact, when I told him the next day that I had meditated there, he said, "Well, I'm glad you felt the quiet." So It was
Wow.
just a remarkable place. And as we're driving around, he said he had seen the sign on the van, and so we got talking about pickleball, and he said, "Well, I don't play, but I'll give you the contact information of someone who plays all the time." So he did, and I got in touch with this guy, and he said, "Well, I'm out of town. I'll see if I can find you a game to play tomorrow morning, or even tonight."
And did you tell the person at the university what you were doing and the
Oh yeah,
Pickleball Nomad?
oh yeah. I
Yeah.
tell everybody.
Yeah.
Yeah. So, it's one interesting thing is that nobody, since I started talking about this and started doing it, nobody has said, "Well, that's a really stupid idea." Lots and lots of people get a gleam in their eyes, like, "Oh, I wish I could do something like that," which is part of the point of oldishness is if you're physically capable, you can do something like that. So, it's one of the questions is, if not now, when, right? So if you've had this dream your whole life of doing whatever it is, and you're at all capable of even doing it poorly, but you really want to do it, it's not a great idea at our age, I don't think, to put it off for 20 more years. So,
Right.
it's really remarkable. Nobody has ever said that's stupid, and that never happened to me before.
I think you're onto something.
I think I'm onto something. This guy that I was in touch with said that he would try to get a hold of some people and see if he could arrange some play. I decided that I would spend the night. The iOverlander told me about a place that was about 10 miles away. That was a wildlife management area. And apparently in Iowa, there are wildlife management areas that are managed by the states for wildlife, I guess. And you're allowed to camp there for up to 14 days. And then you're supposed to move along. It's kind of like the Bureau of Land Management on the federal level does the same thing. So I went to this place, and I arrived just before dark, and there was a pickup truck and a car in the parking lot. And I said, "Well, there's probably hiking trails here." And, so I sat in the car for a while, not ready to get out and, get set up for the night. So I sat in the car for a while, and some people came out of the woods, and one of them was wearing camo, and I'm not sure, but I think he was carrying a bow. But anyway, he came back, and there was 2 vehicles, 1 guy per vehicle, and they spent some time hanging around talking with each other. And at one point they went out and stood by the road, and I could hear them talking on a cell phone. And my brain started doing, "Oh, I've stumbled across a militia or something," just weird things. It was late at night. Why not, right? So, and I wasn't really actually scared at that point, but it was like, I asked myself the question, should I be scared at this point? Should I stay here? I don't know. But I didn't want to leave, because this was the only other choice nearby that I could see was the Walmart parking lot. And, everybody's heard that, you can park your RV at Walmart overnight. But I don't want to do that. And B, it turns out to be less true than it used to be. Some Walmarts have started saying no. So anyway, I sat there for about a half an hour, and then another guy showed up in a pickup truck with a trailer and a 4-wheeler on the back of it. And they gathered together, and they started getting the 4-wheeler down. And I'm like, I don't think this is a militia. I think this is hunters who have probably shot a deer. It was in November. So I figured they had probably shot a deer and needed the 4-wheeler to get it out. And I was like, okay, so I'm probably not really in danger from these people. And they did, but they were fine. They didn't come up and talk to me. They didn't knock on the window and say, "What are you doing here?" Any of that stuff. But it was clear there was going to be a lot of ruckus for the night. So I decided not to stay there, and I drove back up, and I said, "Okay, I'll stay at the Walmart." And so I went into the store thinking, if I'm going to stay someplace, I should patronize the business. So I went into the Walmart and bought some stuff. And I went up to the clerk when I was checking out, and I said, "Is it okay if I spend the night in your parking lot?" And she said, "Oh, no, we don't allow that anymore."
Oh,
So rats. So I should have asked for a refund. But
that's right.
but I was hungry, and I'd bought a sandwich, so I did that. So I went out and I sat in the car, and I got an email from this guy I had been in touch with who said that he had found me a place to play, or he'd found me a game to play in the next afternoon. And I wasn't going to be around the next afternoon. I had places to go. So I thanked him for that, suggested that I might come back at some point. And I found a place to stay on the other side of Des Moines, about 2 hours away, where there was a rest stop where I could park the van. And that worked out okay. It was pouring rain when I got there and pouring rain when I got up and drove away. But so what? I got a roof. So I did that, and I got back on the road, and I played in the least likely place that I could imagine from here in Maine. I played the next day in a place called North Platte, Nebraska. So I drove across Iowa, and I got to North Platte, Nebraska, which is raised the question, what the heck are people doing here? But the app said that people play pickleball there. So I got in touch with the local ambassador, and she said, well, we all played this morning. I'll see if I can find some people to come back out and play, and I'll meet you there at the park. And so she came down, wasn't able to find anybody. So she and I played singles for an hour. We had to move some snow off the court, and
How
very
did
nice.
you do that? Did you have a shovel, or did you have a broom?
There were shovels and brooms there at the court, because it's winter, it's outdoors, and so I found that a lot of people play outdoors even in the winter, even where it makes no sense. Possibly more so because of COVID than before that. People just got in the habit of, I got to play, so if I have to play outside, I will. So she was very nice, but it's like North Platte, and it turns out that North Platte, there's a river and 2 railroads go through there. And so that's why the town is there, so that all this stuff passes through there. Later on, I revisited one of my friends on the way back home, and I told him about North Platte. And he said, oh, yeah, I know about North Platte. In World War II, a lot of troop trains went through there. And North Platte was famous for greeting the troop trains, and everybody brought sandwiches for all the soldiers.
Oh.
So, yeah, I know. So I like North Platte now. I went from there to Denver, where I started off the part of my journey that was totally unexpected. As I went and visited the children of one of my father's brothers. And I hadn't seen these people in, we figured, probably close to 50 years. I knew them. I knew their father pretty well, because they grew up out west, and he was a pilot, so he would come back east and visit the family. So I knew their father and their mother pretty well. And I'd met some of the kids when we were kids, but hadn't really seen them since then. They welcomed me into their home. My cousin Donna invited me into her home, and that was really nice. And coincidentally, one of her brothers happened to be staying there also. So, and he and I actually remembered the last time we saw each other was when I did a cross-country trip in a van with some friends back in 1970. So it had been years since we had seen each other. So that was interesting. People changed quite a bit in all of that time. We talked about the family and stories, and, growing up, they had a different reporter and what our grandparents' life was like when they were growing up. And the consensus is that my father wasn't a great reporter, because he got a lot of stuff way different, but they had documentation. So anyway, so that was pretty good. And then I went to visit my aunt, who turned 100 this year. And is living by herself in an apartment still. I hadn't seen her also in over 50 years. And they put me in touch with a cousin who lives in the same town as my daughter out in California. And I'd never met him before, and I knew he was there, but we hadn't managed to get together. So I went and visited my cousin when I was visiting my daughter, and I've introduced them. And so this was totally unexpected.
Wow.
And I told them that I was headed, after I spent time with my daughter, I was headed back east, and I was going to stay with some friends in Sedona. And they said, oh, our other brother lives just outside Sedona. So I went to see him too.
Wow.
So that was a very big reconnection for family that was not on my agenda when I left home. I had no idea. I thought, I figured I'm going to be going by Denver. Maybe I'll stop in and see them. But that was the extent of it. Until the day before, I wasn't committed to the idea that I would go there. I didn't know how the time was going to lay out. So I left Denver.
I think that's the nomad part. Sometimes you don't know where you're going to end up or what adventures you're going to have.
That's right. Yeah, yeah. To be a nomad, you have to be very flexible. You know, you've got to be prepared to deal with things don't work out the way that you thought they were going to, or things do work out the way that you thought they were going to, but slightly differently, or you know, it's kind of like life, right? So, but you do have to be flexible, or you're not going to make it. You have to be prepared to sleep in a van in a downpour, or as I found out, you have to be prepared to sleep in a van when it's 9 degrees outside. So the nomad part was actually quite interesting. It wasn't as nomad-y as I thought it was, but I actually hit all the high points of what the plan was in terms of my next stop after Denver was I went and I stayed in BLM lands at a national monument in southeastern Colorado. And I played pickleball there. I found a place to stay in a place I'd never even heard of. It's called the Canyons of the Ancients National Monument. It's outside Cortez, Colorado. And it's this huge area. It's a giant area, and it's got canyons in it. And it's just the river carries on from there to go to what we call the Grand Canyon. So, you know, it's like 100 miles upriver of the Grand Canyon. And there were canyons there. I walked down into one of them. It was called Burro Canyon. And as far as I know, I was the only human within 5 miles of me.
Wow.
So I spent the night.
Was that beautiful?
It was gorgeous there. You know, it was gorgeous. And it was kind of scrubby desert, but with mountains off in the distance. So much of America looks like scrubby desert with mountains off in the distance. You know, you get out west and the western part of the country, a lot of it is scrubby desert with mountains off in the distance. The middle part of the country is all farmland. It's a remarkable amount of farmland.
I have to ask, how did you survive the 9-degree night? My mind is still back in that. When you said that, like, what? Where were you and how did you survive that?
Well, it was actually several nights. There was this cold, windy spell that hit when I was on my way back. One night, I was in the parking lot of the Mid-America Air Museum in Liberal, Kansas. I had to go to Liberal, Kansas. Once I saw it on the iOverlander, and there was a place to stay in Liberal, Kansas, I had to go there. And I had to cut from Arizona, where I was, I'm going to guess that a lot of the population doesn't come in that category of liberal. And then I cut from there across. I was
going to say, does it feel liberal?
A lot of it didn't. So I cut across a piece of Texas that clearly wasn't. And then a piece of Oklahoma that clearly wasn't. And I have no idea. I didn't talk to anybody in Liberal, Kansas. I just found this giant parking lot. I sent an email to the museum and I said, can I really stay there? And they said, oh, sure, come on. And stick around. We'll give you a tour in the morning and all that stuff. And it was a 10-acre parking lot. Nobody in it. Nothing to block the wind. This howling wind coming across. And it was very cold. But I was comfortable. You know, I have a very good sleeping bag and another pretty good sleeping bag and a couple of blankets and hats and stuff, you know, so I slept okay. I was warm enough until I had to get out of the sleeping bag, and then it was less pleasant, shall we say. The cold was tough, but the wind was really blowing. I looked it up and it was like, they said it was 25-mile-an-hour winds. So it was like seriously windy. But it was okay. It was fine. You know, it was perfectly safe and big open sky and lots of flat land. And I did not play pickleball in Liberal, Kansas. I was at that point I was en route home, so I did not play pickleball in Liberal, Kansas. I did play in Cortez. I came down out of the national monument, and I'd spoken with the local ambassador. And he said, there's people probably playing right now at the park, and gave me instructions to the park. And as I arrived, there were 4 people playing who were just finishing up a game. And he had contacted them and said, watch out for this Pickleball Nomad guy from Maine. He's going to come by. And they actually stuck around longer than they were going to, so I could play with them. So I could say that I played in Cortez, Colorado. Very nice people. very nice level of play and beautiful spot, surrounded by big mountains. Then I went from there to the Grand Canyon, where I slept in the Kaibab National Forest. And
Wow.
went to some scenic overlooks in the morning on my way out from there and looked at the Grand Canyon. I didn't have time to go down into it or get more involved in it than that. And then I carried on to my daughter's house in California from there. It was a few-hour drive from there. And I had a great time with my daughter and her family. My ex-wife was there when I got there, so we had a couple of days with our granddaughter. Got to have both of her mother's parents. She has other grandparents, but both of her mother's parents in the same place for a couple of days, which never happened. That was the reason that I went out there faster than I thought I was going to, so we could overlap. And then a couple of days that week, I got up and I walked her to school. She's 7, so I walked her to her elementary school about a mile away. Then I went off and played pickleball, and then I went back and went and walked her back home from school, and so that was great. So I had a good time there. I played twice while I was there in that town, Riverside, and same deal. There were 3 courts. Everybody very welcoming. It was the most diverse group of pickleball players that I've seen. So there were Northern Europeans and African Americans and Asians, and I'm pretty sure there were some Native Americans and so much more diverse. Beautiful weather and just fun playing outdoors and nice people as always. While I was there, I went and visited my cousin that I had never met. He's 80, still painting. He and his wife still do stuff. She looked at me like she really wanted to learn how to play pickleball, and he was like, "No, I can't play pickleball." So I stayed there for a few days, and then I went to Sedona, where I stayed with some friends for a couple of days, and they introduced me to some of their neighbors, and we went. I taught all 4 of them how to play pickleball one day.
You're like the ultimate pickleball ambassador.
Yes.
You're not a pickleball ambassador for a certain town. You're like a pickleball ambassador.
Yes.
We have to think of a title for you. It's like you're the national pickleball ambassador or international, or I don't know. Well, I wanted to ask you what was scary about doing that and what was exciting. What would you say?
The scary parts were mostly I've gotten over the part about walking up to strangers to play pickleball. That's actually turning out to be fairly easy. You hold a paddle in your hand, you walk up and you stand there and people say, "Hey, you want to play?" So that's pretty easy. And that happened everywhere that I went. But where am I going to spend the night was scary a couple of times. And I did the driving that I did was a kind of a mix of highway driving. I didn't want to do all super highway driving, but the route that I ended up taking was probably a little bit more than half was on highways, and the rest of it was on what William Heath Least Moon called in his book the blue highways, where you look at a map and the big highways are red and the little tiny roads are blue. So there were blue highways, and there were 2-lane roads, car going in each direction, cows on either side, that sort of thing. And some of those roads were scary, especially late at night. I did a lot of driving in the dark because the time changed on me when I wasn't looking. And it gets dark at 4:00. And so, I'd say, I'll get someplace by 5 or 6. I'll get set up. It'll be great. But no, it gets fully dark. And I found the scariest one was headed toward Liberal, Kansas. I was on a 2-lane road with a 65-mile-an-hour speed limit, which is stupid. It was stupid. And what happens in places like that is that there's a local behind you or a big truck behind you.
Yes.
And they don't want you to go 65 miles an hour or even slower than that. They want you to go 75 miles an hour, and you're on a windy back road and you can't see, so that was kind of scary. And also, where am I actually going to sleep? I haven't yet gotten over the part of, what if somebody knocks on the window? What am I going to do? So I chose to have plan Bs in most cases, but and to the extent that I could, I made sure that I could stay there. But even so, somebody could knock on the window. So that was a little bit scary. What was exciting was the whole thing, really. It was just, seeing America out the window. I spent a lot of time. I drove 8,000 miles. And so I spent a lot of time looking out the windshield and the side windows and, looking at what America looks like. And I just saw a narrow band of it. You can't go across and back. You just see this narrow band. But it's pretty remarkable. The most exciting thing, I think, was I was talking to somebody before I left who was of the opinion that America's gone all to hell and it's just horrible everywhere. And I didn't see any of that. I wasn't in any big cities, so I didn't see that. But everywhere I went, people were friendly. Nobody accosted me for any reason. There's a lot of sameness. There's the same on the outskirts of every big town and city in America. There's these miles of strip malls and car dealerships and chain restaurants. And sometimes, I think that if somebody just dropped you down on one of those roads, you wouldn't be able to tell where you were because they're all the same. So there's a lot of that, a lot of homogeneity, but there's a lot of very friendly people just living their lives. And, the fact is that most people are like most people. It's like they just want to live their lives and be happy, to the extent that they can be. So I didn't find anybody that was unfriendly. Nobody spoke sharply to me. I did get some funny looks from people playing pickleball when, I'd miss a shot, but that happens at home. One of the more exciting things that happened was that on my way back, I went back to Fairfield, Iowa, and I played pickleball with a whole bunch of meditators. It wasn't open play and it wasn't on the campus, but there were 3 courts going. And so there were 18 people there, and they were all long-term meditators. It was a different kind of play. I felt kind of like I was with my peeps,
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. So, but all oldish, all these folks are oldish. So there's a lot of oldish people in America.
It feels like such a celebration of being oldish, your whole adventure, and that, what we're talking about on this podcast, that, if not now, when? So go out there and see the country and meet people and find your peeps and experience the universality of pickleball and everyone that plays, and see family, find new family.
Yep.
Celebrate old family.
Yep. It was great. I highly recommend it to anybody that wants to do it. So I'm going to go back out on the road again. I'm going to wait to see whether there's snow to cross-country ski on this winter, but I'm thinking I might drive to Florida and back. And then in the spring, I'm pretty sure that I will get myself to do a longer version of what I just did. I didn't intend to have these time things of Thanksgiving and getting to California on time. So I think I might go back out on the road for 2 or 3 months. I found I need to make some adjustments to the stuff that I bring along to the van. I need to make it easier to organize things and stay comfortable and not have to keep taking out the same bucket to paw through it to find the thing that I was looking for yesterday. But it was adequate. It's just a little minivan. It was perfectly adequate for what I needed. And so I'll go back out on the road this winter probably, and then again in the spring. And it's like being oldish or something.
So this Pickleball Nomad trip was about a month?
Just under a month. Yeah, it was, 28 days from the time I left until the time I got back. So that's about a month. Yeah.
All right. So we will keep in touch with Pickleball Nomad to find out when the next trip is and to hear more about it when you go. I just want to say as we wrap up that you can find out more about Pickleball Nomad on Instagram, Facebook, Twitter, YouTube. Check them all out. Pickleball Nomad, Gregg has a lot to say and share. And so thank you, Gregg. And thanks for sharing this really, I was going to say, epic adventure.
Yeah, thanks. I was looking forward to coming home so I could talk to you about it. It was
I'm glad.
Yeah.
I'm glad. All right. Well, until next time.
And there will be a next
meet
time.
again soon.
Yep.
Yes.
Okay.
Okay. All right. Bye.
Bye-bye. That's it for now. We had a great time talking about my adventures, and I had a great time adventuring my adventures. If you're interested in pickleball, please click on the link in the show notes to Pickleball Central and to Amazon. If you do click on those links and buy something from there, we get a small commission. We like to think of it as a painless way for you to help support the podcast by buying things you probably wanted to buy anyway. We'll be back soon. Thank you. Thanks for listening. If you like what you heard, please tell a friend. If you'd like to hear more, check out our other episodes. Follow us wherever you prefer to listen to podcasts, and come back weekly. Ratings and reviews greatly appreciated. We're very thankful for you in this holiday season for taking the time to listen to our podcasts. You can support our podcast in the fight against Duchenne muscular dystrophy by buying an Everest to End Duchenne t-shirt or commemorative flag or one or more of the books Gregg has written at Gregg's website. To get more information on Dr. Janet and or Gregg, check out the show notes for links to our websites. You can reach us with comments, suggestions, or requests at oldish@canoncom.com. It will always be true that the most fun I ever had playing pickleball was just us hitting the ball back and forth and laughing on the little court next to the library with the river flowing by and the eagles wheeling overhead.